Welcome to another episode of the Distil-Nation NZ podcast. My name's Tom.
And it is great to be back. I'm Cameron, and it is our pleasure to take you into the world of New Zealand spirits.
Yes, today's episode is uniquely special in that we get to talk to, I get to talk to a titan of New Zealand whiskey. But tell us, Cameron, where were you?
Yeah, I got a throat infection, probably from my kids, because that is what kids are great for spreading illness and disease. And so I was looking forward to this because Matt Thomson reached out to us. Mm-hmm. He said that one of his sales reps had become sick. It was meant to do a Christchurch run. He was replacing him on the Christchurch run. Did we want to have a chat? Absolutely. Yes, we did.
Of course.
And then I got a tickle in the throat, and the tickle got worse, and I had no voice for about 5 days, and I had to message you to say, I really hoped this would come better in time, but it hasn't, and so you're going to have to fly this one solo.
Yes, and I'm glad I did. I'm glad I got through that one, because obviously it's a bit nerve-wracking talking to Matt Thomson. He is somewhat the original craft distiller here, starting the new craft movement almost. But it was a good chat, But there's another unfortunate side to this podcast, and it's happened now twice, and we can probably tell everyone that too, because I forgot to press. Okay, I didn't forget. I tried to press record on the video for this podcast, and it didn't go past 9 seconds for some reason. So I have 9 seconds of Matt Thomson sitting in a chair, and I've got 29 minutes from the other camera, which is just Matt Thomson. There's not me in it. So the rest of it will be a picture or something. So sorry to everyone on YouTube. Unfortunately, this is also the second time we've tried to record this intro because I forgot to press record this time for real on our audio device.
Which, can we just take a moment to thank our sponsor, Herrick Creek. Herrick Creek Distillery generously invests in the Distil-Nation NZ podcast. We have this amazing new setup with real microphones. Look, we've heard you. We've heard you. You've said that the quality of the audio quality of some of our interviews hasn't been good enough. And yep, fair enough.
Totally. Yeah.
We'll own that. Honestly, when you reached out and said, hey, let's start a podcast, like, sure, like, how hard can it be? But actually, to produce a quality one does take investment and time. So first off, thank you for listening.
Yep.
Thank you for your feedback and for letting us know, for hanging in there when it hasn't always been 10 out of 10. But we certainly, with this setup, are hoping to raise the standard going forward. So again, thanks to Herrick Creek Distillery. Next time you see them, if you can just pass on our appreciation.
I'll let them know.
Perfect.
Yeah, I think I've got a word in with the guy. So anyway, we'll listen to the chat I had with Matt. It was a good chat. I am going to just say I'm omitting one part of it, which was more of a distiller's chat of it. So I'm not exactly sure how that's going to cut together. But just in case anybody's wondering, it was more about the New Zealand whiskey definitions and adding wood to a barrel while aging a whiskey. And we just had a discussion about that, which isn't very exciting for a consumer, but it was exciting as a distiller to chat about. But if you do want to know any more about that, you're always welcome to reach out to us, and I'm happy to share what our thoughts were. Anyway, have a listen. All right, let's have a chat. You were at the whiskey show, right?
Yes, I was.
In September.
Yep.
So I was really curious because you were over there sort of talking about Manuka, right?
Yeah.
Was that sort of the big push for the show? What was your idea of going over to the whiskey show?
Well, we already sell with the Whiskey Exchange in London, and then that's the show that they run. So we got invited over to do that, which was quite a compliment actually.
Yeah.
They would sell, I don't know how many whiskey brands, but a lot, so it's great to get the invite that they thought that would be a good contributor. And then that's the one that is it's not the easiest to explain, but it's one that is fairly specific to New Zealand. So that's good.
Yeah.
It's something that other people don't have. And it's also something that I started doing, like, 2005, I was home distilling and I was smoking malt at home.
Yeah.
With my barbecue. That's the crazy thing, actually, going over to London with it. So, 2005, I would buy malt from the homebrew shop and then get a Manuka fire going, and put some mesh over the Weber barbecue and wet the malt down and put it on top.
Yeah.
And then put the lid on and then wrap a sheet around it, spray a bit of water and wrap the sheet around it and get really smoky. And mess around with that.
Yeah. And how did those first ones turn out for you? Was that
Not very good, actually.
No?
And nothing turned out that well, but I held on to the dream.
Yeah. It sort of sparks that, doesn't it? It sort of sparks the dream, eh?
Yeah, well, you yourself, I mean, you're a tinkerer and a maker,
Yeah.
so you're sort of excited by it.
Yeah.
And then, so that was in the early days. My flatmate was into brewing. What actually happened was I'd bought a house and a friend of mine moved in with me, and we had another flatmate, and then he moved out after a while. He went overseas. And we thought, I don't really want to get another flatmate in. And we thought, how else could you make money out of that room? And I was like, you could have a grow room. We could grow weed in there because you'd probably make more money for that. But neither of us was stoners. Like, we both drank single malt whiskey.
Right.
And he knew quite a bit about brewing. And he also had studied jewellery. So he had some copper skills.
Oh, yeah.
And so we built a still. That was a key thing, actually.
Yeah.
Because we built the still, and then I went to the homebrew shop to get malt.
Yeah.
And saw that you could buy stills, right?
Right, yeah.
So I would have just bought one.
Okay.
But we'd built one.
Yeah.
So then, and I'm a maker, right? I come from the film industry, making props and sets and stuff, so
right.
I'm inclined to make stuff. But because we'd made it, then you could tinker with it. And then I made a second one that was better, and eventually, moved up to making our wash still that we got, which is 1,800 litres.
Yep.
The gin still I didn't make, but I designed it and got someone to make it.
Yeah.
So I like doing that. But yeah, then so it was doing that, and then I sort of toed and froed overseas. I used to work in London and Dublin, the film industry, building film sets. Then I came back 2008 and wanted to get a whiskey business together, and thought that it was too hard to start a whiskey distillery from scratch.
Right.
And so I started looking to see if I could buy some whiskey as an independent bottler, just for fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you did, didn't you?
Yes, that's
Yeah.
correct. Yes. So this is you asked about me taking Manuka smoked whiskey over, and then I go into like the whole.
We've gone into a totally different way. That's fine. That's great.
Well, it did. That was the initial. You asked that, and then the initial thing was actually that was the beginning. Was drinking whiskey and home distilling,
Right.
Like with my flatmate. Then, so it was great to turn that around to wow, we took this to London. People liked it.
Yeah.
But in between that, then what happened was I talked to a guy called Warren Preston from Mills Reef Winery, who had the entire Wilson stock.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And he initially wouldn't sell anything to me. And I just wanted some, it was just like a fun thing to do. It was, I wouldn't do the maths on it. Thank God I didn't. Or, you wouldn't start.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I talked to Whiskey Galore about maybe bringing a cask over from Scotland, or just for fun. And eventually, over about 6 months of me emailing and calling Warren, he said that I could come down and go through some casks, and so we did. We went through about 50 casks, brought samples back, and I gave them to Whiskey Galore, a whiskey shop in Auckland, and Glengarry's in Auckland, and then Whiskey Galore found faults in the samples, and we went down again and went through another 50 casks.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, because the first one had to be good.
Yeah.
And I wasn't confident. Now I'm confident to select myself,
Right.
but I kind of wanted the approval of, some people that I trusted.
Yeah.
And then went back and bought 2 casks and got them on the market. and we got them on the market 2009, and then say March, we hadn't sold them all, but I had a big list now of ones that I liked.
Yeah.
The strike rate was about 1 in 12
Okay.
of ones that we would buy.
Right.
And then sort of March next year, I called Warren to see about getting another cask, and phone went through to the receivers, and he'd gone under.
Oh, yeah.
And that was a real shame because he was trying to get
Neighbours going on.
Yeah.
Sorry.
right. He was trying to get a distillery going in Queenstown, and I hadn't struck a deal with him, but I kind of thought that I could buy a new make from him when that happened. And anyway, so we had a brand and we'd started it, and our supply was cut off. So the receivers would only sell all of it or nothing, and I didn't want all of it, nor did I have any idea how to raise that kind of money.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And so Australian investors bought it, who are the New Zealand Whisky Company,
Yep.
which, it turns out was really great because that forced the issue that I had to start a distillery
Right. Okay.
because my supply was cut off.
Yeah. So you're in it now. You're sort of going all in at that point. You were in it. Yeah.
Yeah, and then they bought the whiskey with investors, and I think, I don't know, they needed some money for branding or whatever. And so they actually called me to say, hey, do you want to buy some more casks? And I knew this was my chance. So, and I already knew what I wanted, so went down, decanted the casks. I wanted to make sure the steel was very clear.
Yeah.
Went down, we decanted the casks, waited for the freight to take them, paid them on the day, and then that was it. That was my supply to work with. But I was standing on the shoulders of, standing on the shoulders of giants was I don't know, but but I wouldn't have started had I not been able to get that whiskey. I probably wouldn't have started a distillery from scratch.
All right.
I would have wanted to, but maybe I would have thought it wasn't possible.
Right. But because you had sort of gone into it, sold some bottles, sort of.
Yeah, and we sort of had something.
Yeah.
And so I feel really great about that because New Zealand's got quite a long whiskey distilling history. So I don't know if you know, we had some reasonably sized distilleries in the 1890s.
Yes, I've had a good read through the the New Zealand Whiskey book. Is it? Yes,
it's quite a hard read.
It is a hard read, but it's good. It's interesting because it's the only one out there, isn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah.
And so it's a different book. It's actually a Scotch whiskey book that I read. That a Scottish bank lent us the money for our railroads and banned whiskey distilling. Do you know about that?
No.
So, I mean, I read this in a book. So,
okay, I love it. Go for
it wasn't just on the internet.
Yeah.
A Scottish bank lent us the money for our railroads. Now, back in the old Commonwealth days, which seems like a good idea, a good system to me. You've got countries sending their raw produce or raw materials to the UK. That's the toolbox of the world, and then they would refine it and send it out. So, like grain making whiskey or whatever,
wool,
cotton,
stuff like that.
Whatever. And so, New Zealand, because it's a good country for growing barley and a good climate for Scotch-style whiskey, could compete with Scottish distilling. And so they put a ban on making New Zealand whiskey. And supposedly that ended in the 60s, and that's when Wilson started.
Okay.
And Wilson...
It makes a lot of sense, really, doesn't it? Because you sort of see that huge gap in distilling totally right up to that point. Yeah, I've long wondered that, to be honest, because it's never really explained that gap.
Yeah. And then I think it's Greg's Coffee that started Wilson's.
Okay.
Something. I'm talking now. Is it? I think you can use like malt extract, like as a coffee substitute or something like that. Greg said something to do with malt.
Okay, right.
Maybe that's not true. Anyway, Wilson started, and back in those days, you know how New Zealand wine's got a good name now. People think of New Zealand beer, craft beer being really good. Back then, New Zealand produce like that wasn't seen as very good.
Right.
And it would have been, I think, Wilson's just failed to get a foothold where Lion and DB, who imported Scotch, had all the accounts, and so Wilson's ended up selling on price, which is not very good,
Yeah.
They never had a good name. Then Seagram's of Canada bought Wilson's in either 1980 or 1981 and started making a single malt called Lamalore.
Mm-hmm.
And then Seagram's, which was a big multinational, was a really big international spirits, I don't know what the word is, conglomerate.
Yeah.
Sold up their international interests in the 90s, and Foster's bought Seagram's New Zealand, I think supposedly not for Wilson's distillery, but bought their interest in New Zealand,
Right.
and just stopped it. So therefore the Wilson's stopped with a whole lot of stock.
Okay.
But the stills were, I think one of them went to Fiji or something.
That's
you
right.
have rumours of where the stills went.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I guess Warren Preston then from Mills Reef bought that, with the dream. But part of that dream, I mean, there's a whiskey dream that goes right back a long way, and the people that started Wilson's were sort of hoping for bigger and better things, and unfortunately that died out. And had they kept going for another 10 years and put out higher ABV, because they were bottling at 37%, which is no good, 37.5. They bottled at 40% up and done some better cask selection, then they'd be.
They were so
booming
close,
now.
Yeah, hitting that whiskey boom. It's a bit of a shame, but
yeah. And there was nothing wrong with the whiskey either. Like people go, oh, Wilson's had a bad reputation, but there were no bad flavours in it. There just wasn't a huge amount of flavour.
Right. Yeah.
But you could put it up against like Chevis or something, and it was pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, but I think maybe it might have opened up the door for you, the fact that they weren't there anymore, that's, and not just the fact that you got the bottle to independently bottle some of it, but, if there's a huge player in the game, it's always a bit harder for smaller guys to come in and start disrupting it, eh? But there was really nobody when you kind of started, was there? Was there anybody else kind of doing whiskey at that time?
No, not when we were bottling. Kaiapoi's always been there. They had some whiskey.
Yeah.
And there was, so then New Zealand Whisky Company. Then Workshop Whisky started, who were bottling for New Zealand Whisky Company, who then were bought by Scapegrace. So anyway, I'm not going to tell someone else's story.
Yeah,
it might not
that's
be
fine.
correct.
Yeah,
or,
yeah,
what I mean?
yeah.
But so that was But what I guess. Anyway, that was the seed. That was the seed for us, and it's part of that lineage. So that was
right.
That was really nice. It was because although I wasn't part of that, I kind of felt because when the cast that we were selecting, the first 17-year-old and 18-year-old, we were at 23-year-old, were really beautiful, delicate whiskies. So it was really sort of honour to have access to those.
That's pretty neat. Yeah. Absolutely. I guess, do you still keep any in your private collection at home?
Yes, I do.
You do? Yeah. Pull them out every so often sort of thing?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. So we were going somewhere, I guess, with that, because you were bringing this to the world, right? So the Whiskey Exchange, so how does this all get to that point?
Well, what's great is that we're no longer trading in what was in our stock. So initially, I'm going, I've got selected casks of what will be Lamalore that we've devalued by putting our name on it, actually.
Okay.
Because at the time, a bottle of Lamalore was worth more than a bottle of Thomson Whisky, you know what I mean?
Right, yeah.
But you're going, I've got this selected where it's nice to go, these are products that are made 100%. This is an idea that I thought of doing. I wouldn't have been the only person to think of making Manuka smoked whiskey, but I did think of it myself for me, back in the early 2000s, and acted on that. And so this is what, I thought of, this is what we've made, and here it is, and it's a new flavour that didn't exist in the whiskey world before that, and people like it. So that's the ultimate compliment, it's brilliant.
Yeah, it is a neat flavour. It's pretty good that we do have a maltster in New Zealand, I guess, that puts that all together for us. Are you using Gladfield malt nowadays for that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you go to the whiskey show, and they asked you to do a panel. Was one of the things you did, eh? And so, tell us a bit about that, because there was not just you. There was obviously people from around the world on that panel.
Yeah, so we had a smoky mezcal. What was the other one? It was a smoky whiskey, but the smoke was by putting it into smoked casks.
All right, okay. So they would smoke the cask first and then put the whiskey into it.
Yeah. Wasn't it? Cotswolds do that. There's a few distilleries that do that. There's an advantage in that one, that you don't have to buy smoky malt, which is more expensive. But when you're making smoky whiskey, you take a late cut. The smoke's carried in the oils.
Yeah. Right.
But if you weren't making smoky whiskey, the cut that you would choose would be earlier. So therefore, if you're putting it in smoky casks, you can take the cut that you want and then put it into the cask.
Right.
So it's potentially technically better putting it into a smoked cask.
Have you tried it yet?
Not really. I mean, I might have gone second fill into one of our own casks.
Yeah.
But it's worth thinking about.
Yeah.
As you dial in the still. I mean, that's because I'm the owner and distiller, so I think about these things, and it's nice being able to do it. Oh, let's try that. Oh, that's not so good, or that's better.
Absolutely. Yeah. I went to see Peter over at Belgrove Distillery in Tasmania a few weeks ago, just because I knew he had done some weird smoked stuff, and I was quite interested in that. And he is actually putting. He's got this weird propane tank thing that he does, and he puts the fire in there. And he just forces the smoke into the whiskey. He doesn't even let it sit on top of it. He puts the pipe into the whiskey and actually lets the smoke bubble through the whiskey finished. And it comes out nearly black, and it's a very potent kind of smoke. I don't know how safe it is to drink.
Does he then redistill that?
No. That's so he puts that into the barrel just like that. And it was dark, and it was pungent, and I liked it. Like, it was strong smoke, but it certainly was more ashy and harsh than you'd get from the usual smoked whiskey.
Yeah.
But I've never tried the other one where you just smoke the barrel first and put a whiskey in. That sounds quite interesting.
That's not smoking the barrel first.
Okay.
It had smoky whiskey in the barrel.
Oh, I see what you mean. Right. Yeah.
So that's like an ex-Lafroig barrel.
Right, yeah, okay, I get you.
Because you might get the hard... I mean, that's like... The concept of Manuka smoked whiskey makes sense to us in New Zealand, because that would be the most known wood for smoking.
Right.
Yeah, and it's also internationally, it's known from the honey. So it's a good concept, right? But then you have to make it taste good, which was also... a bit tricky. I find peat smoke a lot easier flavour to work with.
Do you? Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. What is it about the Manuka you find sort of... is there like a specific element to it, or is it just in general harder to get the flavour?
Like peat and red wine cask goes really well, whereas Manuka, you think of the barbecue-y kind of notes.
Yeah.
Doesn't go so well. It doesn't go so well with French oak. It doesn't go well in ex-wine casks.
It sort of suits that more
right.
American sort of flavor, the charred, just the
Yeah.
I see what you mean.
Yeah, it's and there's been some kind of sharp notes in there, which I just had to watch my distilling to get out. Where you make your cut and things.
Yeah.
It's been a learning process, but I feel like we've been getting better, which is good.
That's great. Yeah. Did you happen to bring any with you?
Yes, I did. Yes,
because I haven't tried any in a while now. I'll get us some water as well. Sure. I sit here all day long, and it's very quiet around here.
Yeah.
And then anytime I come back after work, I usually get some sort of noise from either side. That's usually the way it goes in here. But now the full noise. I'm disappointed Cameron's not here. We should just mention that for everybody. The full noise. Cameron did buy a bottle of that, and we've tried it together.
Oh, right.
And wow, turning up to 11. I love the knob because it's 100% that one. I really enjoyed that one. This one, I have a small sample, a very small bottle, one of your sample bottles up on my shelf, and I just sort of reference it every so often, and I'm trying to remember sort of your profile. But I imagine it's a much older batch than whatever this is now.
Yeah.
So,
in theory, this should be better.
so you're still calling these progress reports. I've always wondered about that.
Oh, right. So this one shouldn't be a progress report one unless it was an old label.
Oh, right. Okay.
Oh, this is a fairly old bottling, actually.
Is
this
it? Yeah.
More than a year ago. But that was basically the progress reports from when we were using small casks.
Right. Okay. Right.
Which I actually made because we were talking earlier about being hard to get the American oak casks, and actually made a whole lot, made like 140 maybe, 20 litre casks out of American oak from the Appalachian Mountains.
Yeah.
That was good.
Yeah.
And I could, because we made them quite thick stave. I mean, there would be like 3/4 inch 18 mil staves, but for a small cask, that meant there was quite a bit for reconditioning.
So did you get to reuse them again? Yeah. Okay.
But then we switched to now, I don't know how long ago it is, like a year ago maybe, we stopped using those. We had the last of those through. So whether this has got some of those, I don't know.
Yeah, that's all right. Yeah.
But that was the change when we changed. I wanted to get rid of the progress report, and it's like, so now it's minimum 3 years, but it would normally be, say, 4-year-old Manuka smoke.
Right. Oh, wow. So, and then I assume it's a blend of a few barrels or something like that, usually?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what else? How much?
And is it 100% Manuka smoked barley that you're doing with them, or was it sort of
varies?
mix?
Varies.
Okay.
And I do a bit of smoking barley myself and mucking about. I'm usually experimenting.
I love that.
Yeah.
I too. I don't know if you saw in the parking lot, but I've got a couple smokers out there, and every so often I pull them out and try something, to see what you can do. But this, I love the Manuka in this just because it's soft and it's fruity, it's light, but it's still got that ashy, almost peat, but it's obviously not a peat.
And it's a really oily spirit. You get that oil carryover from the wood.
Yeah. How was this received over in London?
Oh, really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, really great. Of course, it's a niche within a niche. Like smoky whiskey is a niche, and then that's a niche within that.
Yes.
But I don't know. I mean, you've got a room full of all kinds of whiskies. Well, here's one that's different to those. So that was good, and it tasted good.
You can only find it over here, right? I mean, so what was everyone else bringing to the table with their smoke? Because obviously you're on the smoky panel, right? That's what it was.
Yeah. What else were they bringing? Mezcal's made. Do you know how it's made?
Not specific, not terribly specific, but a little bit.
The agave cactus, they basically make a hangi. They heat up hot rocks over a fire, and they bury the agaves in there and cover it up, and that cooks them. And then they mash that up and they ferment that.
Right.
So those ones that they do like that are smoky.
Right. Okay.
But the thing, I feel like smoke's a real connector.
Yeah.
I think there's something sort of deep in humans that you feel, like a special moment. And I think it's like we've been lighting fires for a long time now. And although we as like city dwellers might not be by a fire very often, there's something sort of primal about it. There's something nice and sort of deep and connecting about it. That smoke.
That was the gathering place for thousands of years, wasn't it? Around a campfire.
Yeah, so I feel like there's something primal about it. Something deep. I mean, there's thing, like I do love whiskey and I'm fascinated with whiskey and things. And there's some, someone's born or someone dies or someone gets married or something. A beer isn't as powerful as a whiskey. Like, oh man, should we have a moment here? Like something big has happened, which could be really good. It could be really terrible, and whiskey can carry that moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whereas like RTD gin and tonic. It's not good.
Doesn't have the same gravitas, does it? No.
No. So that's something that I really feel there's something deep with whiskey about connecting people, and it's such it's a product, as Dave Broom would say, of the climate, the land, the people, and it's you would talk about, as you well know, it's only 3 ingredients: the water, barley, yeast, and the cask. Yet you get these really complex flavours, and it. We get drawn into it.
Yeah, it's quite a magical thing, whiskey, isn't it? I know we can dissect it and say, this one comes from the yeast, and this one comes from the barley, and this fermentation was this and that long, but once you drink it, and you're really tasting all those different notes from 3 ingredients, you're kind of blown away, really, yeah.
And time, does so much and so little, like, Sometimes you can get. There was a friend of mine who drinks quite a lot of whiskey was coming over to stay at my house, and I bought a bottle of Glenlivet 12, and then I bought another cheaper blend because I thought he would go through quite a bit, so we'd start with that, and the tasting notes were almost exactly the same with the Glenlivet and the blend,
right?
But they were a world apart, as well, in quality,
yeah.
So I think there's a preciousness with time, and that's gin, which I also really like because I like making gin because it's really fresh. But gin's the opposite. If you want more juniper, you just put more juniper in.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Whereas if you want more cinnamon in the whiskey, well, how do you get that? Is that a long ferment? What's...
Yeah. Did I put the barrel in the wrong spot in the warehouse? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fair enough. So I'm curious, just because I've never heard, I've never really dived into your story too much. So I sort of just know what I know from passing and online and whatnot. But what's your goal with the Manuka one? Is it to sort of, is it to showcase Manuka subtly or quite strongly, or is it to, what's sort of your ambition there?
Obviously, I'm just into whiskey and kind of making stuff.
Yeah.
But so the kind of founding idea wasn't really based on a business opportunity. It was just, it's a bit like starting up a band. You're into something, and then you go and get a guitar, and start going for it. You don't really
fair.
think it fully through. But the kind of idea was that I wanted there to be a New Zealand whiskey that we could be proud of. And I didn't feel like there was that. So when we were starting, Wilson's was still on the shelf. So you could go to most bottle shops and buy a litre bottle of Wilson's. And then there were limited amounts of what was branded Milford whiskey, which would have been the ex-Lamalore. But I didn't feel like, if you went to Ireland, you went to Scotland, you went to Japan, you went to America, Canada, they could, in those households, they'd be able to pull out a whiskey from their country that they were really proud of.
Yeah.
And I felt like we didn't have that. And so that was the goal, of whiskey that we could be proud of.
Yeah.
And then you also don't want to be a copy of Scotch. And before we did the label, people would go, oh, yeah, you should make it, like Scotch, but, a little bit different, with a twist or something like that. And it was I'm going to do the label that I want. Because, of course, it was myself and my wife at the time and business partner still, Rachel. We were funding it. And so, with not very much money. But, damn it, I wasn't going to go and do something for a target audience. Target audience was me, and it still is me. I make whiskey that I like at a price that I would pay for it, and that's hopefully other people like it too. That's so I wasn't really trying to showcase the Manuka as in. I thought it was a good idea and wanted a New Zealand whiskey, and that's maybe it's a little bit of a cliched shortcut to it. But I do love smoky whiskey, and it doesn't make sense to use peat. We also make peated whiskey.
Yes, yeah.
But which I like, you
Yeah.
know. But and so the New Zealand mindset. I mean, I've never heard of anyone digging up peat and burning it here.
Yeah.
Whereas,
Manuka, you
yeah,
would.
everyone would burn wood. So
Yeah.
it makes sense to make that whiskey here.
That's totally fair. Yeah.
Yeah.
I totally agree. And I think sort of when I've seen anybody bring a bottle of, overseas and they're thinking like, here's something from New Zealand, I usually see them bringing a bottle of your Thomson, Manuka, which is quite special, really. You should be proud of that.
Yeah. No, I am.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing because you know yourself, like being visitor, like it's so much hard work.
Oh, yeah.
And then, when you get a compliment, it's like, wow, oh, there are actually people out there,
That drink it, yeah.
drink it and enjoy it.
Yeah. So, while you were over there, did you get any chance to hear from people what they're sort of thinking about New Zealand whiskey in general? Was that a topic at all? Did that come up?
What are they thinking of it? Well, the big issue is, and this is sort of warning to anyone starting a whiskey distillery now, we've seen what happened with gin and we've seen what happened with craft beer, which is really great for the consumer because the level of gin has really increased, right?
Yeah.
And the level of beer has really increased. But the market's completely saturated by both of those, and they can get a bit samey, these extremes of things and stuff like. And so whiskey is obviously a lot slower, like the barrier to entry is so much higher in terms of laying down stock and things like that. But in the time that we've been going, there's lots of other New World distilleries that have started.
Yes, yeah.
And so just going, oh, great, I've got some New Zealand whiskey, here we go. Well, there's people with Swedish whiskey, Danish whiskey, Belgian whiskey, Ukrainian whiskey. There's whiskey from every country in the world that could make it. So there's the big danger is that, that as far as I can see it, that it becomes too saturated with these New World whiskies. And let's face it, Scotch is pretty good value. Like the New World whiskies are more expensive, but they're not necessarily better.
Yes,
yeah. They're more expensive because it's small scale production is more expensive, and they're rarer on the international market. But it may switch. There may just be too much around, so we'll see. We'll see how that goes. Over the future years. But the response was really positive for our whiskey.
Good. That's good to hear. Yeah. I mean, I think we're good. We're pretty lucky in New Zealand to not have a huge amount of distilleries, like we talked about Tasmania, got like 77 whiskey distilleries on that small island, I think, what do we got? Maybe like a dozen in New Zealand, maybe,
Yeah, but it's still, of all of us combined, which isn't the output isn't very big.
No.
Would produce more than all the premium whiskey drunk in New Zealand. Like, even our small scale would produce more than what we could drink locally, so therefore we have to export.
Okay. Yeah, I get what you mean. Yeah. The New Zealand's, the size of the customer base here is not here, right?
So we've got to go and carve out our space in the world. But I mean, New Zealand's got a good image.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm banking on that, But yeah, I'm just slightly worried about the amount of these new distilleries around. But hey, just
it'll hit its peak eventually, for sure, as gin has and beer has, like you say. So yeah.
But so what the important thing in New Zealand is that people are making good whiskies, and New Zealand gets a good name, like Japan has done.
Yes,
they've got a great name for whiskey, and they make great whiskey.
Yeah.
But
yeah, you can tell us because you've written the New Zealand whiskey guidelines. We may as well just talk about that really quickly.
Sure.
I mean, you're sort of the godfather of those guidelines. So, what was the idea? Was it Japan? Was it seeing that sort of precedent with them having that sort of troubled period, and then?
So the reason. So this is ages. This is like 2010 probably. I noticed that the New Zealand definition of whiskey has to have the characteristics normally associated with whiskey and has to be minimum 37%, which is the threshold for the definition of spirits. And so I went, oh no, that means that you could get any spirit and add some whiskey flavour and go, well, this is my whiskey. And that was really dangerous if we wanted to have a whiskey industry here, because there's always some loser that, wants to put out some crappy product,
Yeah.
So I started talking to I forgot what it's called now, New Zealand Spirits Association or something like that,
Right,
in Wellington, who are basically international brands, and their purpose is to kind of speak up, because you get a lot of negative media towards alcohol and stuff, and to go, well, no, hold on a sec, it's not all bad, like there's quality things that people drink and enjoy. So to have no one's purpose is ever to push for excessive drinking, or
exactly.
or unhealthy drinking. But they were maybe because they were all international brands, they couldn't really speak for New Zealand, and so they wanted to have like a New Zealand producers wing of that. And so then I went along. Then we sort of organised a meeting with other supposed New Zealand producers. And then a whole lot of producers that turned up that didn't have distilleries, that were kind of bottling stuff. And I just went, I thought it was going to be distilleries here, and there weren't. And so then I kind of walked away from that. We're still working on that. Then that formed as the Distilled Spirits Aotearoa, but that formed, now it's mainly distilleries in there now.
Yeah.
It changed. Over the last 10 years, it changed from people doing kind of dodgy things to actually distilleries opening.
Yeah.
But I still proposed at the last Spirits Conference that they still had no base definition for what was a New Zealand spirit, because New Zealand spirit should be distilled in New Zealand. What I got together with some other whiskey distillers, and I I first wrote down what I thought would be the rules, and then took it to Pocono, because their owner there, Matt and Celine Johns, come from Scotch whisky industry.
Yes, yeah.
So they brought a whole lot of experience. So that was very good to
Get that
right.
Back,
That was slightly. It was good because then there's two of us on the same page, and there were things that he didn't like that I'd put in, and those. As in New Zealand, I don't know who else has talked on this, but we're getting at least 6% angel share per year.
Yeah.
The evaporative loss, whereas Scotland averages 1.8%. So, say, at any age, you're a lot further down the road in New Zealand in terms of maturation, and the Australian rule is 2 years old, and so I pushed for 2 years old. Other people wanted 3 years old to be the same as Scotch, but it's not. It sort of it makes the barrier to entry too high, and you want to be able to adapt to the market and things, and small players want to be able to come in, so you don't want to be setting up rules that stop small players coming in.
Yeah, definitely.
But the key one was to have a credible whiskey definition that anyone would recognise in the world, that enabled experimentation, but also push for quality. So the main one for me that I was actually pushing was that single malt whiskey had to be made in copper pot stills.
Yes, I remember that chat. Yep.
And that was really painful, because a few people had started with stills that weren't all copper, and then we'll sort of cry poor and go, I'm starting a whiskey distillery, but copper's more expensive. It's like, we don't have to call it single malt whiskey, but also, like, this price is still is minor compared to all the other production costs. So, and you're sort of making the Rolls Royce of whiskey, but you want to use stainless steel. But that was, it was a big argument. But,
is that unique in the world that we have that requirement? Because Cameron and I had talked about this, and we were trying to figure out this, because Scotch doesn't have that.
No, but it's all. No. But they don't need to have it, because everyone uses copper pot stills. So you only put in a rule where.
So it is a unique requirement, though, in the world,
Potentially.
I'm pretty sure it would be, because I can't think that I haven't ever read any other ones, but. Yeah.
My big regret on that one is then we'd set that, and then someone in a later meeting said, "Oh, people have asked, but what percentage copper?" And I said, "Vast majority," and other people said, "No, it should be at least 50%, at least 51%."
Right.
And I was like, "Ah,
Bare minimum.
that's
So do you have a problem? Do you have a problem with my two stainless?
well,
bits on?
no. But the concept, the thing was that we'd seen it happen overseas, where a big player would go, "Oh, sweet, I'll just convert a big stainless milk vat into a
yes.
still
Yeah.
and put out what I'm calling single malt whiskey, and it tastes really bad. But once I've got that big stock, you can't then backtrack on the legislation.
Yeah.
So we needed to get that one in early, and it sort of meant that there was a minimum quality. Like, if it's got to be in a cask for 2 years and it had to be made with copper pot stills, then the chances are it's going to taste a lot better and be recognisable as single malt whiskey.
I'm going to be completely honest with you. I wasn't convinced on the copper pot thing at first.
Yeah.
I decided to go with a copper pot, not necessarily because of that, because I wasn't ever making single malt whiskey, was never sort of my thing anyway. But I went with it anyway, just because I had sort of read on the virtues and the, you know, what it can do for you. And after using it now for a couple of years, I have to say the quality is much better. What comes out, what's filtered out by the copper is significant, actually.
Yeah.
So, if anybody's listening and they haven't tried it and they're not convinced, I think you need to try it first.
Yeah, I mean, in truth, you could hang copper in there.
Oh, yeah.
But then would anyone do it? Whereas if you just go, look, the still needs to be made from copper. But within the rules, you can make any style of whiskey that you want, and your still doesn't have to be made of copper.
Yeah.
It's just, if you call it single malt whiskey, it had to be made with copper pot
That's
stills.
right, yeah.
So I think that was okay. And then I pushed for had to be matured in oak containers.
Mm-hmm.
Others pushed for casks. And some people... Sorry, what am I saying? I pushed the opposite of that. Hey, I said has to be matured in wooden containers, and some people pushed for wooden casks, which is what went through, and other people wanted oak only. But I wanted to be able to experiment with different woods.
Yeah.
But I also, like, if you hollowed out a log, I'd consider that
A barrel.
or a wooden container that you could mature in.
Yeah.
And I didn't functionally having them conical, or roundish, works better for containing the swelling of the wood.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted to leave it open. So anyway, that was good. That you can use different woods, I think.
So, okay, back to Thomson Whisky. What's currently what's on offer? What's big? What's going on? What's the release right now that you're sort of pushing? And
This one here.
Is it?
The cask strength Manuka smoke. We've got this other one, Cask Martin, which is in an ex-Pinot Noir cask, which is really nice. This is one of the joys of owning my own business. A friend of mine has got a wine bar, and we did a whiskey and beer tasting there, actually, because whiskey and beer is a good match together.
Yeah.
And then we released this cask to do with that, and so it was cool doing a related label to the wine bar, and the bar's called Bar Martin. And that's gone really well for us. There's not many bottles of that one left.
Oh, cool. So it's an unsmoked, just regular...
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
There's a little bit of smoke carryover because we're a smoky distillery.
Yeah.
But, yeah, that's really...
Could I try
nice
a bit?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. There's another glass if you want some as well. It's quite cool to see your single barrels doing so well. Because it's a single barrel, that one? Yeah?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. It's good to see those ones coming out and doing well like that. Oh, absolutely. Hey, wow. That fruitiness right there on the nose. Sort of dark, pruny fruits. But apple, sort of appley, yeah.
Raisin.
Yeah. that's got a lovely nose on it. There's something else in there. I'm just trying to pick out what it is, but not quite remembering.
Orange zest.
Yeah, a bit of that sort
Yeah.
of zestiness. Yeah. Oh, definitely on the taste, that orange does come through. Almost marmalade-y.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's nice. Yeah, beautiful. You can taste the wine cask in there.
Yeah.
The barley's still there. Yeah, it's awesome. So is it just a single? Was it just in a single
Yeah,
Pinot?
yeah.
Yeah. Wow, awesome. So that's almost all gone now.
Yeah, there might be 60 bottles left, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we should be sold out by Christmas time.
Awesome.
Yeah, so those are cool, fun projects that you get to do.
Yeah, that's really cool. How do you find the wine casks? Do you like those? Are you enjoying?
Yeah, they're really tricky though. Like an ex-bourbon barrel is bulletproof.
Yeah.
Nothing's going to live in that, and the taste is going to be good. Whereas, wine and whiskey aren't a great combination together. And then if the cask has been used for too long and the wine's soaked in too much, or we do shave, toast, and char them. But if you don't get that right and you burn some of the wine into the wood, that's no good.
Right. Okay.
Or if the wood's too wet when you're charring it, then the flavour can come out bad. There's a bit of learning around those.
Yeah.
But if you get it right, then it's really good.
Yeah.
And
Well,
it's good being able to have the local casks.
Yeah. It is always nice when you can use local stuff, eh? Yeah.
Yeah.
You haven't found any local port barrels yet, have you?
No, that's unfortunate. There's just not the good fortified wine made here like there is in Australia. That would be good. So we don't. Sherry and port aged whiskey is really delicious, and we could get some, but I just don't because it's a long way. If we're getting them over from Europe, that's a long way. We get ex-Jack Daniels barrels thanks to Pocono Whiskey, who brings in, and we can get them from them because they're bringing in bigger amounts. And how they seed the world with barrels. So I kind of feel like those are good for making New Zealand whiskey, whereas we're trying to make New Zealand whiskey, and the fortified wine cask coming from Europe's a long way away. Whereas we've got something like 700 wineries here, so I should be able to use the wine casks.
Yes. I actually am not a huge fan of port, sherry, finished whiskies or anything, because I find that they do sort of just diminish a whiskey. You're almost hiding the whiskey, like you're getting a big fruit bomb in it, but you sort of lose the base characteristic of that whiskey sometimes, It's sometimes just overpowered. So I like it a lot better when people use a bourbon barrel or even the wine barrels, especially the STR ones. Like this, it really just pulls through the base characters, which is great, I think.
That as a distillery owner, I'm always looking at what people's entry level whiskey is and what's the youngest, to get that character of the spirit. But if from a drinking point of view, I do really like the sherry and port casks as well. So I like those, but I do like with making New Zealand whiskey here, and I feel like I can get, if I need some berry notes, I should be able to get those from the wine casks.
Yeah,
I'm not going to get the sweetness that you get from sherry, but I think it's going pretty well. I do really like the STR, and we've had some really good results with wine casks.
I did a bit of a test with one of our imported bourbons and the rye whiskey recently. And we brought that in and put it into a wet, like Pinot Noir barrel, without doing anything to that barrel. And it does add a lot of that sort of, those red fruit, sweet flavors. So, if you don't even touch the wine barrels and you're just doing a finish with them, they can be quite valuable that way, I found, which is quite nice because at least it's something New Zealand, so we can do that with our whiskies if we really want to pull that in.
Yeah, no, I imagine rye and red wine tastes really good.
You can try
red
some
wine
after.
casks. I think those flavors are good,
I will ask which. So, like, if today somebody wanted to go out and buy a Thomson whiskey for the first time, they haven't tried it before, which I'd be surprised in New Zealand. But which one would you sort of recommend they start with? Where would you put them?
Well, let's start with this one, the Cask Martin. It's
yeah.
good to start not smoky, then move to smoky.
I was just going to say this is a great starter. Yeah, 46%. And it's a really approachable whiskey, isn't it?
Yeah, if you like smoky whiskies, well, try out South Island Peat or Manuka Smoke.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't like smoky whiskies, then go with this one. And if you do like smoky whiskies, Cask Martin's still going to like it.
Yeah. I would 100% agree. So do you have a regular unsmoked one that's available?
Just our two-tone, which is a blend.
Okay, right.
Which is a blend, and that's our entry-level product.
Mm-hmm.
But that sells really well as well.
Mm. I'm just finishing this one up, and I just got like this big cookie, like, chocolate chip cookie, like oatmeal cookie, that sort of thing. That's beautiful, yeah. So
thanks.
Yeah, I hope people do try that. Is there anything else I want to ask you? What's the future? What's exciting you? What's coming up? What do you reckon?
Well, more export. Because we've now got more aged stock. That's the nightmare when you're starting out. You've only got enough ready for the local market. You can't don't have enough to get offshore. So more export. Showing the world what we've got. Hopefully, people like it.
Mm-hmm.
And increasing production, stuff like that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, which areas are you looking at right now for export? UK.
UK. We export to Germany, so there'll be other markets in Europe.
Yeah.
We export a little bit to Canada. The Taiwan. We export to Singapore actually, which is going really well.
Oh right, yeah. I've heard a couple others. Yeah, going to Singapore. Yeah.
Yeah. So looking at sort of markets that we could look after and have a shot. Like the States are so vast.
Yeah.
So we're not looking at the States
yet,
going to places where we can manage and we can get a good connection with someone, like the Whisky Exchange has been really great for us in the UK. If we can get a good relationship with another, shop or distributor somewhere else, then see if we can push that.
Yeah, nice. And Australia, you can buy it there, obviously?
Yeah.
And I guess anywhere in New Zealand, pretty much. I think just about every liquor store I've ever been to has had your bottles, so that's great, yeah. That's it. I mean, that's all my questions for you right now. I mean, there's a ton of other things we could talk about, but I don't want to keep you too late. And you've been very generous with your time. And unfortunately, without Cameron here, he had a plethora of questions for you as well. But hopefully, we can catch up again and do another chat. Yeah. So thanks, Matt. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tom.
I'm gutted I wasn't there because I've come out of that with more questions, and I'm sure you do as well. So yes, I'm gutted to have missed it, but I would sincerely like to thank Matt for his time and his generosity coming in, pouring some Thomson for you. I'd like some next time. So I will endeavour to be there and be in a position where I can physically ask questions next time.
Yes. I had written a beautiful list of questions down. We got through most of them, but then, of course, there are so many more questions I wanted to ask him. But, of course, it was getting late, and he had events the next day. So it was just great that he gave us the time he gave. And it was really good to chat about his current releases. Thank you again, Matt. It was great to meet you. Yeah, that's the first time I met him.
Really?
Yeah. I've seen him at a ton of events, but every time I see him, he's just always so busy. I just figured, I'll see him eventually. So this is it. Herrick Creek's been around 4 or 5 years or something, and never met him till now.
But equally, you'd never met Anthony from Divergence until we set up that podcast as well. See, this is building community within the spirits industry in New Zealand. So great.
Yeah, we need to have a round table one day. We'll get a bunch of distillers, and then see how that goes. A panel interview. That'd be fun.
Yeah. Or add in one step, because I know there are other whiskey podcasts who have done this, but do the live recording.
Oh.
I don't quite know if we have an audience that would be interested in that yet, but I think that maybe live panel interview
Yeah.
of some of New Zealand's top distillers. That would be incredible.
That'd be quite fun. Yeah.
Something to shoot for.
Yeah. So we hope you guys enjoyed the chat with Matt. If you have any questions that you'd like us to ask him in the future, please let us know either on our socials at Distil-Nation NZ or by email, distilnationnz@gmail.com. And you can learn more about us and all our other episodes on those channels or at distillnation.nz at our website. Yeah.
But we have got, so for this year, we've got more interviews lined up. We have, this is what I'm blown away by, genuinely blown away by, is the number of distillers that, we're buying stuff from them because we are ourselves passionate consumers, and we buy something and they reach out to, one, say that they've heard of us, and two, to say, yeah, we'd love to come on and have a chat.
Yeah.
So we have some more topics that we want to bring you, just me and Tom, but we've also got some interviews lined up with more distillers from around New Zealand. I'm excited for what this year's going to bring.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for being around and listening and watching, and you guys rock.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Cheers.